Today on Building the Open Metaverse.
For e-commerce, the channel we need to be on is on the web. That's where most of the transactions happen. And so we need to make it as easy as possible for people to access these experiences.
Welcome to Building the Open Metaverse, where technology experts discuss how the community is building the open metaverse together. Hosted by Patrick Cozy and Mark Petit.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Building the Open Metaverse Season 6, the podcast that showcases the community of artists, developers, researchers, executives, and entrepreneurs who are building the internet of tomorrow. My name is Mark Petit, and my co-host is Patrick Cozy. Patrick, welcome back.
Hey, Mark. Hey, everybody. So this season, we're welcoming entrepreneurs who are leveraging the full potential of real-time 3D technology, the web, and open standards to build innovative new businesses. Our guest today is another excellent example of that.
Yes, our guest today is Neha Singh, an entrepreneur at the forefront of revolutionizing online shopping experiences. Neha has a unique background, we'll come back on that blends deep technical expertise from her studies at MIT and engineering roles at Google with a passion for fashion that you cultivated at the Fashion Institute of Technology. Neha channeled this diverse interest into founding Obsess.vr, a virtual store platform that is transporting e-commerce from static product grids into fully immersive 3D branded environments. Obsess has partnered with major retailers like Dior, L'Oreal, Crate & Barrel, and others to create hyper-realistic virtual shopping worlds that drive engagement and purchases. Neha has been unveiling Obsess latest innovation lately that made virtual retail not just a novelty, but the future vision for how we will shop and interact with brands as the internet itself evolves into an immersive 3D metaverse experience. I mean, this is fascinating, Neha. We're so looking forward to dive into this topic. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mike and Patrick. Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
So, Neha, to start things off, we'd love to hear a bit about your background and what inspired you to start Obsess.
So my background is a combination of computer science and fashion. I got my graduate degree in computer science from MIT, as Mark mentioned. I was then a software engineer and tech lead at Google for 5 years. While I was there, though, I always thought I wanted to be a fashion designer because I love fashion. So I started taking fashion design classes on the side at FIT. However, I realized after a couple of semesters that I was really bad at drawing. So then I decided to stick to the tech side of fashion and joined a luxury e-commerce startup where I led engineering and product. And that was my first kind of learning about the e-commerce world and about how all the platforms operate. And after that, I was the head of product at Vogue for 4 years, where I launched all of their digital products, including Vogue.com, Vogue Runway, and so on. Worked with, again, lots of brands who were advertisers in the magazine, but on their digital experiences. And then left Vogue to start Obsess about 7 years ago.
So in all these experiences, what prepared you the best for becoming an entrepreneur?
I would say all of it. But at Google, I was not in the super early days, but I was there in the early days. And there was a lot of kind of spirit of Silicon Valley tech entrepreneurship. And pretty much I knew at that point that I wanted to start my own company. I tried to do something like right after leaving Google, but I was not quite ready for it then. So I joined another startup, which was very early stage, the e-commerce one that I mentioned. And that was an incredible experience. And I don't think I would have, been able to create Obsess without that experience of being at another startup for 2 years and really kind of going through everything from building product to fundraising. And then at Vogue, I really learned more about the fashion world and about how they speak and what inspires them. And ultimately, what we have created is a tool to let brands express their creativity in a way that they weren't able to do online. And so all of that thinking, I think, really came from there. So I would say it feels like it's something I've been working towards all my life.
So did you know your entire life that you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
I wouldn't say my entire life. I would say really more after I started working at Google. I think before that, the extent of my thinking was that I was going to be a software engineer. And build stuff, but I didn't think of building stuff in a way from like starting my own company. I just thought about writing code.
Well, one quick question before we dive into Obsess. I saw that you did AI at MIT way back then. What kind of AI were you doing back there?
It was actually a combination of AI and decentralized networks. I was in the network architecture group that invented the internet about 20, 30 years before that, headed by David Clark and Tim Berners-Lee. So we were my thesis was on, in the future, if the internet is decentralized, how can using AI, all the services and nodes like talk to each other and learn about what services they have available. It was very theoretical, but it was very interesting because it wasn't the world that existed at that time, not even the world that exists quite today. I would say it was something that may exist in like 2050. So it was an amazing thought exercise to just think about like what that world can be like.
So you mentioned with Obsess that you're helping brands kind of get more out of their digital and virtual presence. I mean, could you go a bit deeper into the pain points or gaps that you were trying to solve?
The fundamental pain point that we are trying to solve is, if you think about, a typical e-commerce brand website today, it looks like a grid of thumbnails on a white background, and whether you're shopping for fashion, beauty, home, like any product category, it's exactly the same as shopping for toothpaste on Amazon, right? That interface looks the same. And so every product is just reduced to this tiny thumbnail. And in real life, that's not the way we shop, right? And there is a lot more that goes into purchase decisions, especially at slightly higher price points where there's a brand and a story and the experience. And we believe that there's a huge opportunity missing online for brands to actually convey that story and experience to their customers, because online shopping today is very much directed shopping, which is, you know what you want, you can search, filter, like it tries to just put you into a specific path. What's missing is discovery-driven shopping, which is typically happening offline today, or it's happening on social platforms like Instagram, but it's not really happening on brands or retailers' own website. And so if the brand can actually inspire customers, like bring them into their world, ultimately it's going to build a longer term relationship and increase customer lifetime value. So that's really the metric we are targeting for brands, which of course a lot of things go into that. But it's really about how can they increase customer lifetime value from digital channels.
So can you walk us through what a virtual shopping experience powered by Obsess will be like for a customer?
So our experiences, first of all, are all web-based. They can be easily accessed on a web link. They live as part of the brand's own website. So it's all kind of powered with our software and hosted by us in the background. But to a user, it will appear as if it's part of the brand's website. So let's take an example. One of our customers is Laneige, which is a beauty brand that is part of Amore Pacific. So if you go to us.laneige.com, which is their homepage, you will see a virtual world in their top menu. And, like typically when you go to a e-commerce website's menu, you might see their categories, you might see an About Us. So now there's a new option there, which is, different brands might call it different things, but virtual world, virtual store, so on. And when you click on that, that's when it will open right within their website. It's all optimized for mobile, where 75% of traffic across our customers is. And essentially what you land into is a completely different experience from a typical e-commerce site. It's completely visual, it's 3D, and then you can navigate through it like you navigate through a game. It's ultimately very intuitive because A, like that's how we navigate in the real world, and B, because most consumers today are used to gaming, they know how to navigate these spaces, right? So you can turn around, you can go through it, you can go through different sections or rooms. Laneige in particular has actually 6 different islands. So like the space that you land in, there's like water and animations. It's completely fantastical. It's not really trying to, replicate anything that they have or can have in real life. And then let's say we go to their like lipstick section, and there are all these animations and there are products on carousels, and you can, there's video. Of course, you can click on products to get all the e-commerce information you can add to your cart. But you can also actually take a quiz about your skin condition that then actually leads you into the right skincare room. So overall, it's a super interactive experience as opposed to a typical e-commerce experience, which is very passive. You're just like scrolling down in the infinite grid. Here, you are making a decision at every step of where you want to move forward, where you want to go. Again, very similar to gaming. And that's what really actively engages the customer. And that's where we see the results.
It's so cool to see all those gaming principles and immersion being used. As you look forward, are you looking at using other gaming mechanics, like maybe progressions or rewards?
Yeah, we have started to do that a little bit in a couple of our experiences. Gamification is definitely one of the big priorities, not just, as you mentioned, in terms of the user interface and how you interact, but actually mechanics within the experience that encourage people to keep discovering and give them a reward at the end, which is quite customizable in our platform. So the reward could be a discount code, it could be like free shipping, it could be access to an exclusive, product or job. But I would say, like, in terms of the games we have implemented so far, even something very simple, like basically, I mean, you can call it like a scavenger hunt, but we say, okay, go find, this brand mascot or this pieces of something all over the store. And people who engage with those games and actually finish them, they are 10x more likely to add to cart. So the level of engagement, if we actually give you a gaming mechanic and you follow it, is just through the roof. So like it's a huge thing that brands can invest in to deepen that relationship with the customer. So that's kind of a very simple example. And then we have all the way to one of the more complicated examples is we have a game for Prada Beauty for one of their men's fragrances, Luna Rosa. That is part of Pradaverse, which is their virtual world for all of their different beauty, skincare, fragrance products, and each of them have their own kind of worlds. But particularly for the men's fragrance, it's a gaming world, and it is totally inspired by their campaigns with Jake Gyllenhaal, where he's in this like super dark, stormy seas. So we kind of replicate that in the game, and then you're going on this boat, and you have to collect all the ingredients of the perfume, because it's hard to sell fragrance online, right? Like you can't really smell it. So we can try to evoke the notes. And then the way we do that in this game is you have to collect the vanilla bean and all of these different things. Anyway, it's so cool. And it's such a different way to approach like selling fragrance. And that experience is available on the web. It's also available on the Oculus Meta Quest, which they actually deploy at certain retailers in Europe. And so people can go and actually put on the headset and play the game, or of course, they can also play the game anywhere on their site. So yeah, we are definitely kind of constantly improving and increasing the number of like gaming options we have available in the platform as default, and then also like building custom games like this one.
Right, and I encourage everybody to go check the stores built by Obsess. You can Google it; it's easy to find. I went on American Girl, right? The Crate and Barrel store. We're going to talk about it a little bit later. It's actually quite amazing to see what you can do with the web in the kind of interactivity and immersion and engagement. So, which is it's great because it's the promise of the metaverse. So a more engaging version of the internet, and it looks like it's here now.
Yeah, I would say in terms of the web, like that's definitely was a huge strategic decision for us, which kind of platform to build on top of. And our platform is built on top of WebGL, open standard, and few reasons for that. But first is really like for e-commerce specifically, the channel we need to be on is on the web. Like that's where most of the transactions happen. Of course, brands also have apps for their loyal customers, but that's a smaller percentage of their overall traffic. And so we need to make it as easy as possible for people to access these experiences. And also that's a lesson that I learned from the early days of the company, because first when I started, we were, building for all the first generation headsets where you put the phone into it, like Google Daydream and Samsung Gear VR. And that was great, but like the reach was very low. So that's when we decided to build our web-based platform. And for brands, like we want them to post something on Instagram and people to click a link and the experience to open right there in the in-app browser and Instagram and TikTok, because these are their channels, or even on email and SMS. So that's what we designed our platform for. Is like first, it has to be super easy to access. It's a link that they can really, use all the channels. So for the Prada experience that I was just describing, they actually, if you go to any airport around the world and in those duty-free shops, like you have the fragrance section. And if you go to Prada, they have a QR code, and that code leads into this Pradaverse virtual experience powered by Obsess. So that's how easy it has to be. And number two is it has to be fast to load. We know that consumers will leave an experience, even 5 seconds is too much. Like they'll probably leave before. Our typical load time for our experiences is 2 seconds. And that was a big consideration in terms of kind of using other gaming engines versus using WebGL, which we can really build on top of and optimize. And then also like we kind of control more of our own destiny in terms of how we can, how we can build on top of it. And then of course, there's the whole community behind it. So I think for us, that's a very kind of important piece to make it as accessible. And then also going beyond sort of our current use case of the platform, but we really believe that, I believe that the future of the internet will be 3D. You can call it metaverse, you can call it whatever, but it's going to be open. And this will be the future interface of websites. And that's really our kind of grand future ambition, is that we can be a platform sort of like Adobe Experience Cloud that manages all of the front-end experiences, web experiences, digital experiences for brands.
Great story on how you came to the web and having that low barrier to entry and things needed to load quickly. The Cesium story is very similar. I heard WebGL a few times and my ears really perked up. So I was hoping you could share a bit more about the tech stack.
Platform is built on WebGS and then WebGL, and we use 3JS as the library. And then on top of that, it's all kind of our proprietary software that we have built. But it really consists of two parts. One is kind of our front-end rendering engine, which is what you typically see in the virtual stores. And that's where we really focus on performance, optimization, but then also photorealism and like rendering quality, because the other kind of important piece is that brands don't necessarily want their virtual worlds to look like games. Maybe they want it because that's a creative direction of a campaign, but we also really needed to give them the option of building something very photorealistic. So that's why we have options for both real-time 3D experiences that today can't be as photorealistic. And then we have like pre-rendered experiences that you can navigate through, then we can make extremely photorealistic. So that's sort of like the user-facing aspect. And then we have a content management system that we have built called Ava. That's our kind of proprietary software for managing these 3D experiences. And that's where, you can upload like a 3D model that's generated by any standard 3D program in a standard format like FBX, OBJ, etc., GLB. And then it will kind of compress it and optimize it for the web. And then you can set up everything about the experience from, styling of it, because we want each brand to be able to, use their own kind of brand styling, buttons, UI, UX, all that style. And then all the way to even setting up like translations, because we work with, global brands and they want to launch these experiences in multiple markets. So it has to be able to handle different languages, currencies, product assortments from different markets. So all of that can be handled through the CMS. So both of those are essentially what our tech stack is, and then we are hosted on AWS.
Let's talk about your customer-facing tools to build the experiences. It looks like you can do a fair amount of, author a fair amount of capabilities. When I was doing some bit of research, you can do live events, you can live stream content, you can do full gamified experiences. So what kind? It's virtually like a small game engine. So what are you building all of that technology by yourself on top of 3GS?
I would say it's a combination. Some of those things are integrations with other platforms like live stream. We will typically integrate with like YouTube Live or any other live stream platform that the customer is using. Other examples that we have integrated with external platforms is, for example, like virtual try-on for beauty. Because for basically the facial recognition and letting you see how makeup looks on your face, there are some very established companies in that space, and typically our customers are already using one of them, so we do the integration. We have a bunch of integrations, and we also have actually integrations and partnerships with all the major e-commerce platforms, including Salesforce, Shopify, Adobe Commerce, and SAP. Because that's how we pull all of the product data, inventory information, etc., and also sync the cart. That's way too much detail, perhaps. But then in terms of like everything that we have built, all of the gaming kind of capabilities that I mentioned, that's something, yeah, we have built in-house. And we have a set of what we call like standard games that can all be set up from our CMS. But then we also have like custom games, which, you can't really set it up from the CMS, so that we do custom development for. But yeah, there's a lot that you can do in the CMS, and we have a whole team just dedicated to like building out more things on the CMS. And typically the flow that we follow is for any new feature. Of course, if it's like a big feature, for example, we launch what we call Shop with Friends, which is social shopping in real life. You go shopping with your friends and family, but it's not a behavior that has existed online. So we had added that capability. That's going to be a standard offering of our platform. So that's all available through the CMS. However, if we are building something more experimental, which we don't know yet, like, okay, is it going to take off? Are people going to use it? Then we first build the user-facing part, start to collect data. And then if we feel like, okay, more brands want to buy this, people are using this, then we will kind of build the editing capability into our CMS.
Can you build up a bit on this social shopping? I mean, do you support like a multi-user experience with a voice chat?
So in our kind of real-time 3D experiences, we have the ability, like for you to navigate them as an avatar. And that technology we call branded avatars, because each brand can decide on the character style of how the avatars in their experience should look. Because typically when you go to, if they're going to a game like Roblox or Fortnite, there's a particular character style that each game has. But for a brand, they might want to own that IP of how their avatars should look, similar to how they own the environments. So we build the ability for each brand to be able to design their own characters. So for example, if we are working with a fashion brand, they might look much more realistic. But if we are working with Disney, then the, characters can, the avatars can look like their characters. Anyway, so when you are navigating through the experience as an avatar, then there's multiple multiplayer options. So one is you can invite your friends to shop in the experience with you. In that case, you have a personal sort of link that you can share out. And then when people join through that link, you can admit or deny them, similar to Zoom. So that's more of a closed shopping experience. And there you can chat via audio while you're seeing everyone else as avatars. Then we have a more kind of open option, which is for brands to hold events in their virtual spaces where they can invite their loyal customers or all their customers, and they can have a host avatar, which could be an influencer or their brand ambassador, and they can communicate with everyone via audio. And in that case, because it's more open, the users can only communicate via text chat that is filtered. So yeah, we just want to make sure the environment is safe. And of course, for brands, that's very, very important. So currently, yeah, we have those two modes available. And then another mode we might be something we can do but we haven't done yet is just showing you other people that are around in the store that you may not know, but you cannot chat with them because we don't know who those people are. So just like you go to a store and you'll see other people, right? And that actually influences your purchase decision if somebody is going to a specific section. So so we can enable the same thing in our virtual stores too.
You plan to implement Black Friday fights?
Yeah, well, holiday is definitely our busiest season, and we have to beef up our server capacity to handle all the traffic.
So for the production process for the brands, it sounds like you've done so much to streamline that and make that easy. Are you looking at generative AI to also streamline it?
We have already been using that over the last year, but yeah, to your point, first, streamlining the process was very important to us. We have already released over 350 virtual stores. So, that cannot happen when you're doing each one very manually, which is the reason for the CMS and being able to kind of edit all of these things really easily. The one part, before Gen AI, that was still a very manual process is the design of the environment and the 3D modeling of the overall space. And so we have a 3D design team that does that for brands. Sometimes they have internal resources that will, maybe they're retail designers who can design their virtual stores or their agencies. But that's definitely kind of the part that takes the longest. And also because for most brands, pretty much for all brands, when we are working with them, it's the first time that they're ever creating a virtual presence. So it's a huge brand exercise for them to decide what do they want their virtual world to look like. Do they want it to look like their stores? Do they want some completely fantastical experience? And it's a pretty big decision because ultimately this is a very visual branding tool, and whatever you make will be memorable to users. So that's why the design process always took a long time, because it was a lot of back and forth. And, we had to do lots of options, and doing all of those in actually 3D modeling out the environments is a lot of work. So over the last year, first of all, we have started using Gen AI in our early stage design process. So now we can generate a lot of options really quickly, and then the brand can decide like, okay, actually I like this part. And then when we are going into the actual 3D modeling process, then we are, much more streamlined, and we know exactly what we need to model, and we are not doing that back and forth in the 3D phase. So that has already helped cut down our production time by a lot. Now what we are looking into is essentially generating the entire kind of 3D model or the design of the store with AI. Obviously, that the 3D generation Gen AI is still early compared to images, but it's it'll get there in probably a year or two. So we want to make sure we are using that, because that and then there's kind of in between things we can do that we can combine a bit of both and just make the process faster. So that's kind of the phase we are in now. And actually, our first store fully generated with AI with no manual 3D modeling will be released next month. So that will be huge. And that's a bit of a smaller space, but then eventually it's like, how do we extend this? And basically, when we can get to that point, then, brands can release their stores. They could release it in a week if they wanted to, because it can be very fast. So that's really a huge kind of part of our roadmap is the generation of the spaces.
Well, I also read about how you use DALL-E on the Elizabeth Arden project. You want to talk to that? I thought that was a very, very interesting use of AI.
Yeah, that was super cool. One of the early ones. So Elizabeth Arden, which is part of Revlon, is one of our customers. They have a virtual flagship store that they keep updating every couple months with their latest product releases. In fact, just this week, if you go to it now, it has their latest product as the hero product that they just launched. Anyway, so they had these. So part of that experience, of course, there's products, but a lot of it is about the history of the brand, because this is a very classic brand with a very storied history. And we wanted to bring that to life in some way. They had these images from ad campaigns that they had run in the 70s in magazines. And they wanted to have that in the experience, but almost like allow you to step into those worlds from these really kind of old ads. However, like those ads obviously were rectangular, and the person's like legs might be cut off because that was out of the page and so on. So we had to create a whole environment based on that we used DALL-E for, to basically feed it the image that we have and then extend it into a whole environment. So if you go into those rooms, it's really cool because you can basically like step into that world, and it's black and white part of it. And yeah, so that was like a really cool use of AI for taking assets that they already had and making them immersive.
And I even saw AI-enabled baby name generator on one of your customer websites.
Yeah, Baby List is another one of our customers. They're a baby registry. They have we've been working with them for 2 or maybe more years now, and they have done a whole bunch of different virtual experiences on our platform. And then in the latest one, we have this baby name generator, which where you can put your put the due date, and then it will it'll suggest common names for people born on that day, and then you can also just keep redoing it until you get some names you like. So the bigger kind of point around that particular one is this kind of content, right? So what we see from our data is beyond gaming, if we can add a lot of content to these experiences, people really engage, and the more they engage with content, the more they shop. So usually that content process is manual, in the sense that, okay, you shot a campaign, so we can add that video. Like, how can we make that content more automated and more scalable without needing, manual input at every step. And the baby name generator is a great example of that because it's just with AI. So we didn't have to input all these names, and people can just keep playing with it. So I think there's lots of applications of things like that where we can just automate more engagement content in these experiences.
So we wanted to jump into a few more partnerships, but before we do that, I'd love to double back on some of the geek stuff here. So for the tech stack, you mentioned a bit about taking content in a variety of formats like FBX, then the GLTF. I was curious if you could share a bit about, once that content comes in, are you using GLTF for everything, or what open standards you're using?
We are actually using GLB for everything on the web. And that format is the one we have found that works the best across the web. So that's pretty much what we end up converting everything into. And then, of course, we are also working on, beyond the web, we work on other platforms like Vision OS for Apple Vision Pro, in which case we use USDZ.
Cool. Yeah, great to see those being used for what they're each best at. And then for our listeners, GLB stands for binary GLTF. So it is GLTF. It's the binary version of it.
If you use 3GS, have you started to look at WebGPU? I mean, you have WebGPU support, I think, in 3GS. Have you got some early feedback on what you could do with WebGPU?
Yeah, we are definitely looking into it. We haven't quite implemented it yet, but it's on our roadmap for the next few months. But yeah, I'm super excited about that rolling out more broadly if it can make our experiences faster, richer, and start to make the real-time 3D experiences more photorealistic and loading faster. That would be amazing. And I think that's, one of the advantages to our kind of conversation earlier about WebGL and open standards is then we can just use this without, it won't be like an overhaul of our platform. It's just something like we can add on and optimize for. So yes, I'm super excited about that.
So look, we've heard so many great examples of the use cases for folks building on your platform, and you've had partnerships with so many big brands like L'Oreal and Disney. Is there anyone that you think is particularly innovative that you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, I mean, they're all amazing. I'll talk about this one. That's a brand that was recently K18. It's a hair care brand that was recently acquired by Unilever. And theirs is one of the most innovative experiences because what their goal is to educate the customer on hair care or on hair, and use that to kind of sell their products. So one part of their virtual experience is actually you going into the 3 strands of a hair. So you kind of go into, there's a tunnel and an animation. And I didn't even know that there's 3 layers to a hair strand before that. So it does really educate you. And then at every layer you're inside it, and they have an avatar that tells you about it and all this visual content. And nowhere around that are they showing product yet. So I think it's a really interesting strategy. And then you kind of go into the next layer of the hair strand. And then after you have kind of completed this whole journey, then there's what they call a magic science bus. So you enter this magic science bus, and that's where they kind of connect how the molecularly the hair is constructed to how their products work. And everything is you can see with this animation what effect this product will have on your hair, what effect rain will have on a strand of hair. So they used our platform for all of this, but we didn't come up with these ideas. It's just so cool that they thought of using it in that way, and it's so unique. So I feel that's one of the most innovative ones. And then also because then what they also did was they made a real magic science bus and had a pop-up in LA at outside Sephora, which is one of their partners. And then in the real magic science bus, we had the version of the experience in the Oculus MetaQuest. So people could go and try on the experience and have the same kind of hair education journey, which was super well received. So then what they started doing is taking the headsets to all their trade shows, because essentially they sell to the consumer, but then they're also selling to stylists and hair salon professionals, and they're selling to retailers. So in those kind of B2B scenarios, they can also give that experience. And they found that, their booth at these trade shows became like the most popular one. And they got so many more orders as a result of that. So I just think like it's so innovative in terms of like using that education and then really driving it across all of your channels, D2C, retailers, and B2B.
I was looking at this Crate and Barrel experience. I really enjoyed it. Also because it's kind of anchored into being a digital twin of the actual flagship store in New York. I think it's a great idea. And then it looked beautiful, and then you have those abilities to talk to people. I remember something like a virtual design desk when you can go and get design consultation. So I felt the combination of all those things is really enticing for users. So how virtual setting and having, people interact with consumer in the metaverse, is this big demand from your customers now?
First of all, the Crate and Barrel experience, it started essentially as they opened a new flagship store in New York, and then the virtual store opened at the same time as the physical store. So it was part of their strategy as they go omni-channel, and that's one of the buzzwords in the retail industry, and that's kind of really what our technology enables, is how can you have the same experience across multiple channels. And so, yeah, the first experience was a digital twin of the real store, but it is more kind of optimized for, the beauty of the fact that it's all a 3D model is that we can, the architects gave us the 3D model of the actual store, but then we can change a little bit of the layout based on our data and insights, because we have the most data in the world in terms of how consumers behave in 3D web-based virtual stores. So we give those insights to customers in terms of how to, what's the layout of your store and stuff. So we changed it a little bit based on that and condensed it, and also based on the fact that most people are looking at it on mobile. So I think that's a really cool thing, because while it's a digital twin and it's very close to the store, it's not an exact one-to-one replica. But then also now for the spring, what we have done is added a whole rooftop section, and the rooftop doesn't exist in the real store. So I think it's really cool how they extended that concept, and now it has all the patio furniture and you kind of fly into the rooftop. But yeah, in getting back to your question about connecting with sales professionals, yes. So that is one of the big pushes just in the e-commerce industry in general, is how can we make this experience more human. And so we have a variety of ways that you can do that, and brands like to do it. One is like the design desk is an appointment that you can take to then visit the store. So it's the virtual experiences are sometimes used as a tool to drive foot traffic into the physical stores as well. Ultimately, physical stores are the highest conversion and revenue channels still for brands, right? So anything that can help them drive traffic there, and for anyone who lives in New York, they can go there. And then for everybody who doesn't, there's often like virtual appointment sessions that we have. Often, like in our beauty, for our beauty customers, they'll have virtual consultations that you can set up. And that's where also we integrate with other platforms that have that capability, because usually brands are already using some platform for that. The other way is a simple kind of sales live chat where you can ask questions to sales associates that they can answer while you're in the virtual store. And lastly, we also have essentially like human, like a person who's been shot on a green screen video, and then they can be placed into the virtual environment. So usually that's pre-recorded. It can be like a little bit interactive, but they can be used to welcome you, to kind of guide you, and so on. But even with that human element, we see super high click-through, of any human element in the experience. So we really encourage brands to have some way, ultimately, either the person in the virtual experience, or being able to connect with a sales professional that people can get that interaction.
As a consumer, I mean, all these ways that I could engage in these virtual environments sounds so cool. And I'm a total sucker for a roof deck as well. And you mentioned that, you're collecting a lot of data. And I was just curious, like, how do you measure the benefits that the brands are getting?
We have analytics on all user interactions within the virtual experiences, aggregated, anonymized. So that's what a brand will get for their virtual store. They actually get a heat map of, where people are going in their store, like how much time they're spending in each section, how many products they're clicking on, what content they're engaging with, what games they're playing, etc. So they can use this information because it's all digital. Like they can use this information to optimize the store. They can change the layout. They could add a room. They could move a product that they want to sell into the front of the store, just with the drag and drop in our CMS. So yeah, first of all, the analytics data of the store itself is used by brands to optimize the store. And then on our platform, essentially, you can add to cart. And then once you are ready to check out, we send you back to the brand's, regular kind of checkout. And they can track, because we send them tracking parameters. So then they can track, like, how many people completed the purchase, and so on. So essentially, the key KPIs for which brands use our platform, first is brand awareness, and specifically targeting a younger generation. Often, like, brands will come to us because they're like, we are forming our Gen Z strategy, because of just the gaming kind of tie-in and being very used to these kind of interfaces. So brand awareness. Then the second is like customer engagement. So how do we bring these people more into the brand world, and get them engaged? And then it's also essentially like getting more customers into their CRM database. Because what we find in our experiences is, how when you go to a e-commerce site, it often like gives you the pop-up right away to put your email. So in our experiences, once you've engaged a little bit and maybe you've played a game or even step one of the game, then if we ask you to give your email, the percentage of people giving their information is much higher, because they feel like they can get something and because they're more engaged. So that's another goal that brands often have. So in terms of like some of the results, right, that our brands see. So American Girl, you were mentioning, Mark, earlier, they have been on our platform for about 2.5 years now, and they have a virtual museum of all their doll characters. They have seen a 1,000% higher time spent on this virtual museum than on the rest of the pages of the e-commerce website. And they have seen a 25% higher add to cart rate. So we often see like just the engagement is way higher on this than, which is to be expected. And then, yeah, sometimes we will see higher purchase conversion rates. Sometimes we even see higher average order values. So people kind of discovering more things, because it's more, it's not so like, okay, searching for one thing and just going down the path. It's more like how in a real store, you might see something that you was not necessarily on your shopping list. So that serendipity element. So those are typically, and of course, traffic, visitors is a key KPI. And actually for a Taylor Swift experience that we did last year, that was our highest concurrent traffic ever, of course. And yeah, so all of these are the kind of ways in which brands measure the impact.
So do you find having any issues to establish the return on investment of your platform?
This technology is still new, right, for brands and retailers, and they have a lot of different things going on in the retail world and in the e-commerce world, and some that are not so new, like virtual technologies, so they get sort of priority. I do think, like, over time, like with anything, as the technology gets more adoption and just as this kind of interfaces start to pop up in more places beyond shopping. So like, as of course there are virtual concerts now, and as that increases, as all these behaviors increase, then it becomes more and more of a case. But yeah, overall it is, we do have the ability to pretty much track all the actions and track all the ROI. So it's not very, it's very measurable at the end of the day.
So how do you position, platforms like Roblox or Fortnite are highly visible in the world of brands now? How do you position that? I mean, are you a complement to those platforms? Because they come with a huge audience, right? Sometimes the user that people want to target are on those platforms. So and brands want to have a direct relationship with consumers. Then, so are you acting as could you act as a bridge there?
We see all of this as part of the 3D kind of world, right? And whether you're creating that 3D world on your website for your D2C, or you're creating it on platforms like Roblox and Fortnite, which have the audiences, it's kind of the corollary is just how brands are on social platforms like Instagram and TikTok, where they can get access to these audiences. They can't necessarily get that same level of data about engagement as they can on their own site, but both are necessary for brands. So for Obsess, we have started building experiences for brands on Roblox, and we launched the first one earlier this year for Amika, which is a beauty brand. And we are doing more now. But ultimately, our vision is that any platform or device that the brand has to create a 3D experience for, they shouldn't have to start from scratch in terms of imagining what that world should look like, because ultimately it's the creative expression of your brand, and that should be consistent across all your channels. And so we can essentially, you can create the experience once on Obsess, and then we can publish it to web. We can publish it to a touch screen in a store if you want that. We can publish it to Roblox, which is not quite yet possible in terms of just publishing it, because you have to recreate it in Roblox Studio. And then, we can publish it to MetaQuest and Vision Pro. And so that's really kind of the direction that we are heading in, which is multi kind of channel distribution for these experiences.
So looking forward, we already spoke a bit about Web GPU, but we were curious as what other technology advancements that you're excited about.
Web GPU that we spoke about, Gen AI, I think is going to be the biggest one in terms of just making these experiences easier to create, but also to update and having lots of different kind of creative options for brands. And then AI differently also for personalization. Like that's also one of the goals for us in these virtual experiences eventually, is that if you and I go to the same virtual store, we should see different things. And that different thing starts at the products that we see that should be more targeted to us. But eventually, it could also be the whole environment. Like maybe you prefer to shop in a different way than I do. And so how can we kind of use all that information and then use AI to create something that is a very customized and tailored for you, which is not possible for a brand to do in real life in a physical store. That's going to take some time for that whole vision to come true. We are starting with kind of little pieces of it, with something that the first step we did is something called dynamic merchandising, which is that based on a few questions that you answer, it actually changes the set of products that you're being shown. Ultimately, we can integrate with data sources from that the brand already has, where they have information to kind of populate that. So yeah, I think just continuing improvement of real-time 3D on the web. And then of course in the headset world, just, better form factors, like easier, more accessible price points for users, and ultimately that getting adoption. That's of course the best way to experience any of this, because then you're fully immersed in it. So yeah, I think those are the key things we are looking forward to.
Self-expression is a big thing, and when it's going to be a bigger thing, it's a big thing online. Selling skins in a game like Fortnite is primarily around self-expression and fashion, and for us, boys, cars are self-expression too. I do believe that there will be a big, self-expression will drive a big virtual goods business ultimately. Are you already seeing or being involved in commerce activities that are pure play digital?
So far, I would say only on Roblox for the avatar kind of UGC items. We haven't seen as much of. There was like that phase in 2022 when there was a little bit of interest from brands in purely digital items, but we haven't seen much of it more recently. But I do agree with you that it's going to grow over time now that initial hype phase is over and people are trying to find the real use cases. And the other kind of in between use case is also to allow people to see a digital item first and purchase it or give feedback on it, that then informs the brand and gives them data about whether to produce it in in real life. And I know like some of the big sneaker companies have done this in different ways. But I do think we'll see more of that. And then eventually, yeah, for us in the virtual experiences, we want to support virtual goods and physical goods, and both should be possible.
Some brands have invested heavily in NFTs and still have a bit of a bitter taste in their mouth. We talked about gamification of the experience. I mean, having collectibles, managing scarcity. Is that something that you see as, potentially a future feature of your platform?
Yeah, right now you can basically collect points, and what we are working on this year is integration. It's a little bit of a different flavor from what you're saying, but it's more integrated with the brand's current systems because they all use these loyalty programs, and that's a big kind of focus for e-commerce in general is the loyalty. So the loyalty is something that we can integrate into the virtual experience in two ways. So as you do more actions in the virtual store or play a game or get points, then those points can become loyalty points that already have like a scheme of how you can redeem them on the site. But then the other way as well, in terms of from based on your loyalty status that you have with the brand, you get a different experience in the virtual world. So that's not something we have done yet, but it is something that we are talking to brands about. And, maybe you get access to members only kind of lounge, and you get first access to exclusive products. And especially for the loyal customers, like brands are really looking for ways to engage them further because, of course, they are the highest spenders. So I think that there will be a huge application for experiences for loyal members or special experiences for them within this experience, within virtual worlds that could include collectibles, NFTs, physical kind of redemption of it in some way.
So final question here is, do you want to give a shout out to any person or organization?
I want to give a shout out to all the brands and the champions at these brands that are really, adopting this new technology. As I mentioned earlier, retailers have a lot on their plate. They have huge kind of technology priorities. And I think for the people who understand the long-term value of building a deeper digital connection with the customer, and it's not about, it can help you drive immediate sales, but there's a much bigger goal of how now that retail commerce is being slowly taken over by e-commerce, how are you going to establish that same connection? And the brands that can see that and see the future, I think they deserve the biggest shout out. And I would say especially our early customers, everyone ranging from Ralph Lauren, Tommy Hilfiger, all these brands, they tried it before anybody else did, and before there were a lot of data or proof points that even we had. So I think that's really amazing and innovative for these brands, and also just all of the amazing kind of creative ideas that they come up with. And so for us, we are thankful to them for being kind of the tool that they can use to express that.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights and pioneering vision for the future of immersive e-commerce experiences. With Obsess, you're truly at the forefront of merging gaming engagement and branded creativity with utilitarian online shopping. And you made it very clear that virtual retail is not just a passing fad, it's the inevitable next evolution. As our digital interfaces and the internet itself becomes fully realized in 3D, which here in this podcast, we're so much looking forward. And your work enabling photoreal yet imaginative virtual stores is revolutionizing how consumers will discover, learn about, and purchase products. So we really appreciate that you taking the time to present the vision behind Obsess and the technology and everything about it. It's leaders like yourselves driving these kinds of groundbreaking experience that will fundamentally reshape e-commerce and the internet itself. So thank you again for your leadership and for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun. I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks, Mark and Patrick.
And of course, a big thank you to our ever-growing audience. You can find us on YouTube or the podcast platforms, and you can reach out to us on our LinkedIn page and our website, buildingtheopenmetaverse.org. Patrick, Neha, it was a great conversation today. Thank you, guys, and see you, everybody, at the next episode of the podcast. Thank you.